Hello and welcome to the table for Crusader Kings from Paradox Interactive and Free League. So I posted in our solitaire wargaming group that I was very excited about this game, and that was no lie. Pardon my voice, it's the middle of summer, and I'm well, almost summer, in fact, late spring, and I'm dealing with a cold. But so this game, it had arrived. I played a game last night with my kids and some of the AI. And the question is did it live up to the expectations? First of all, I'm going to start off with, if you're interested in just getting to the playthrough, jump to video 2. I'm going to go over setup and then just talk about some of the rules of the game, but I'll probably just talk about the rules as we go. Regarding did it live up to its expectations, the answer is no. It has not. I'm actually quite disappointed in this game, but I'm going to show you how to play it. I don't hate it though. I mean, it's one of those weird games where you have to be in the right mood for it. So I'll tell you in a nutshell. These miniatures are fine, but the bits, when I was punching the bits, see how you can see there's this little tag sticking off the side? That was very common when you were punching the bits, and it was very easy to start tearing or ripping, like the cardboard would start ripping away. You have to be really careful when you punch the pieces to this. The last time I've had awful components like this was a war game. I mean, GMT now has pretty high quality in their components, but DVG used to be really bad, but now they're good. But some of like the Victory Point games, some of the older war games are awful. This reminded me of those. They definitely cut a corner with their cardboard. Now, once you pop it out, if you don't tear it, I mean, it's a nice thick cardboard. It's just fine. But you just got to be careful. That's all I'm saying. I'll leave it at that. There's other games where you can just pop the cardboard and it's just beautiful, right? The next thing is the card stock. The card stock is super flimsy. Like the cards bend real easy. They actually feel like they're cardboard pieces just cut, to be a card. They're really difficult to shuffle. And if you do shuffle them, you have to almost do like the classic card style where, you're splitting it in half and then, having to shuffle it this way, which of course requires bending the cards. I don't really enjoy that. But obviously if you sleeve them, you can overcome that. And then they will last you a long time. I mean, so again, I'm saying it disappointed. I should have probably started with why it really disappointed me, not these little petty issues, but I just want to point those things out. Now, the thing that disappointed me is this game is extremely swingy and random. That's the part that disappointed me. I was expecting a strategy game, and what I got was this War of Mine, the Crusade game. And what I mean by that is, in this War of Mine, even if you have a strategy, you draw cards, and those cards just do brutal things to you, so your strategy may not work, right? Even if you had the best intention, things are going to happen to you, and there's nothing you can do but just smile and take it. This game does that to you. You just get all these bad events, and you have no choice but to accept it. And it really shocked me. I was expecting a strategy game that was of the same pedigree as a Paradox computer game. And what I got was randomness. And and perhaps my bar was too high, but that is my largest criticism of this. That and these trait tokens, which we're going to get into in a second, to me, they could have been a lot deeper and a lot more interesting. I mean, I do like what they did, but I just think they could have taken it another notch. I don't know who Free League is or who the designer is. I'm not real good at recognizing designers. As you guys know, I'm one of those people who I hit record and I go for an hour and then hit stop. I never edit my videos. I'm a real lazy YouTuber. And I know some of you, it drives you nuts, but most of you who stick around and subscribe, you actually don't mind it at all. And one of the other things is I've never held back my opinion on a game. Corey Kaniska, I've had Easter dinner with him. I mean, that's, I'm friends with him. His wife used to work for me. She doesn't anymore, but I mean, we still chat all the time. He made that Discover Lands Unknown game. I hated it. I mean, I'm not going to be afraid to say that I hated it. Even though I love Corey and I love most of the games he makes, I didn't like that one. And a lot of, with me gaming for as many years as I've had a game now, I've learned a long time ago that when I hate a game or dislike a game, somebody else is going to love it. And it just means it wasn't the right game for me. That's all. That's all it means. And I'm not saying that this is not the right game for me, but this is a very swingy game. And I was just expecting a strategic masterpiece. And Paradox did not deliver on that. I'm really disappointed from that perspective. So I'm going to shut up and let you decide. So we're going to play a game. The rules are not very difficult, so that's a plus for the game. The trait system, I think you're going to like. And like I said, I don't dislike it. I just wish they would have did more. I mean, to me, it's the crown gem of this game, the trait system. But I have the game mostly set up. There's just a few minor things we still have to do. But let me show you how this game is laid out. So we'll go through real quick setup, and then we'll go ahead and jump in and play, and I'll explain some things as we start playing. Okay, the first thing is that we have scenarios in the game. So there's 6 of them. All of them can be played solo. If you play solo, it's a minimum of 3 characters. We're going to play a full 5-character game, and I'll explain why in a second. But I really think that you could probably get away with dropping it down to 4, but I don't know if 3 is going to be all that fun, to be quite honest with you. But we'll see. I'm going to play 5, and you can decide for yourself. So they recommend the first scenario here, which is the Kingdom of Jerusalem. It's the first Crusade, basically, and they get some flavor text here, historical. I will tell you that this scenario is probably the worst of all the scenarios. The other ones look much more interesting, and after you've seen the game played, I could probably describe that a little bit better for you, but this game has, if your king dies and there's no heir to the throne, your territory just gets trashed. I mean, we're talking like the days of Risk, back in the 80s, where you're playing a 3-hour-long game and, you didn't get good starting territories and you get wiped out in turn 3. Meanwhile, the rest of the players are playing for 2.5 more hours and you're stuck with 1 territory in Asia and they're letting you keep that, right? It's that kind of feeling. This game has it. I mean, it's awful. That's the thing. I mean, we've evolved past the game of Risk. And that silly mechanic of player elimination or player, destruction. If you don't have an heir to the throne, you lose half your gold and half your territories. And just so you understand, you can only, on a given round, at most, take 2 territories. And territories are how you score in this game. So if you lose half your territories and every other player did not lose half of theirs, you're never going to catch back up. It's an awful mechanic. Now, granted, it is thematic. So you have to balance that, right? The thematic part is good, but the gameplay part is But here's the thing. When you play these other scenarios, you actually start with children. The problem with Kingdom of Jerusalem is you start with a king. You're not even married. Every player starts with just a king and nobody else. No children, no brothers or sisters. So your dynasty is like at a fledgling state. And your king needs to stay alive in those first couple rounds. It is paramount for you to get a wife and get children. Or otherwise you're going to get destroyed. Now, I mentioned that this has this War of Mine feel to it. And that's because you can draw a card that just simply says, your king dies. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And if you don't have a child by then, which by the way is not an action in the game, you have to get a random card draw to give you a child. That's another issue. Is you're relying on the game to award you with a child. You cannot do an action on your own that will lead to a child. It's pure random luck. And so this first scenario is a great starter scenario. I do agree. It's probably the best for starting your game, but I wholly recommend that you do the other scenarios when you start to play this more long term. Okay? I hope that makes sense, and I'm trying to be as fair as possible. I did say I'm disappointed, but I don't hate this game. I'm very pleased to play this tonight and show it to you. And I just wanted to show that there is a big, in my opinion, it's too swingy, when you play this scenario. But the other ones are not bad because you start with a whole dynasty of children and siblings, and I think that's much more interesting. Okay? All right, so we are going to do this, though, and we do run the risk that we're going to get slaughtered, and that's fine. I'm just trying to show you the game, so I'm not too worried or concerned about that. Okay, so when you pick your scenario, it's going to have every scenario except for the sixth one, I think, is a 5-player scenario. Now, you can always just say, we're not going to play with this one, and then make it a 4-player scenario. And there's rules on how you adjust the game to that. But it tells you things. Let me see, make sure you guys can see what I'm seeing here. So right here, we're going to play the House of Normandy. So we're going to be William the Conqueror. So let me put this rule book down so I can have a little bit more control here. Okay, so we're going to be William the Conqueror. And then he starts with pious, brave, cruel, and dim-witted. Okay, so that's his traits. And so I put them out here for you. So the first thing that you're going to see is that these are the traits. Pious and brave, of course, are good traits. Dim-witted and cruel are considered to be negative traits. More on that later. But every player, at least in this first scenario, has 2 good, 2 bad. Okay? There is one player in here that has 3 good, 3 bad, but that's because of the AI we chose. And I'll get to that later as well. Sorry about that. Okay, so what you do is you take these, and the starting traits always have a gold rim to them. So we're going to have traits that have gold rims. There are traits with silver rims. See the little silver around the rim? And then there are traits that have a black rim. Okay, and then we have this brown bag. And inside of this is like 30-some traits, and they have no rim at all. Okay? They are all separate, so don't mix them up. Do yourself a favor and keep them separate. The ones with no rim, all of them go into this brown bag. This is like a random trait draw. Those are traits you get when you go on crusades, and then those are traits you get from events. Those random swingy cards I was telling you about. And then, of course, the gold-rimmed ones are for starting. So once you create your game, these starting traits, the ones that are left over, you can just set them aside. They're not used for the rest of the game, okay? So you take your 4 starting traits, and you put them in a bag that represents your color. Now, what color are you? The game comes with a whole bunch of houses, and so red is always Normandy, yellow is always Spain, black is always the Germanic area, and then green is always Italy, okay? And then there's one and only one blue in this game, which represents France. So we are going to be red, so hence we have the red bag. And then here is Spain, and they're going to have a yellow bag. And you can see Spain starting here, red is starting up there, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a black setup and green. And you'll notice we don't have blue because I wanted to take you through how to do this. So blue would be House Capet. It's always House Capet. Philip I, the Amorous, is the king. And you'll see that I selected Philip I, and he's in the king spot. And he's attractive, humble, gluttonous, and lustful. I do have those already in his bag. And his territories is the Low Countries, Lorraine, Paris, Aquitaine, and Toulouse. He's the only one that starts with 5. He actually starts with 1 more point than everybody else in the game. But you're going to soon find out that he's also the toughest to play because he's surrounded by everybody. Okay, so Paris the Low Countries, Lorraine, Aquitaine, and Toulouse. Okay, so he starts with 5. And every knight on the board is not an army. Okay, don't get confused. These knights represent that those are your territory. Okay, those are territory tokens. You could have just as easily had blue cardboard. You're just laying there to show that it's your territory. It would have accomplished the same thing. Okay, the actual armies are represented by these little foot soldiers. Now, another complication is that the AI has a couple little shortcuts. So the AI is considered to have an army at every location all the time. So it's another negative aspect of this game in solitaire. I'm a little disappointed with the decision, but I also understand that they did it to simplify the game. But you're going to see the ramifications of that soon. But basically, Spain has 4 armies here. France has 5 armies, etc., etc. And I have 0 armies in my territories. I start the game with nothing. So the human players don't get armies to start. Okay, so the next thing is you're going to see that Capet also starts with 7 gold. Sorry about that. He gets the Chancellor development card. I'll show you that in a second. And he's the only one in the game that starts with a castle. So he gets some bonuses that nobody else has, but he's also in the middle. Okay, the AI has unlimited money. So you never get gold for the AI. If they have to pay you money, you take it from the bank. So 2 major cheat things that the AI does: unlimited money and always mobilized. Okay? If you remember that, then you got the AI covered. There's a couple rules about marriages and things that you need to keep track of, but if you remember those 2 things, you got all the cheaty stuff covered. Okay? All right. So the next thing is we have to pick an AI. So the game comes with 5 AIs, and I did not get super creative. So we got, starting with Italy up there, then France, then Germany, and then Spain. Okay, so in that order is 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay, a minor criticism, actually it's major for me because it annoys me greatly, is this needed to be a player aid, not flipping through the rule book to see the AI rules. I really wish they would have done that. In fact, I would have sacrificed some of these silly minis that they gave us for that. But you know what? Some nerd on Board Game Geek's going to put this in a nice format so we can print it out, and then life will be good. Who knows? Maybe I'll even do it. So when you pick your AI strategy, they have a name. So Italy is Ferox, France is Postus, Municio is the German, and Spain is Amandum. Okay, so this is what you need for AI direction. And then there's special rules. So some of them start with extra things. So we said that the France starts with a Chancellor. Let me show you that right here. So every player aid has 3 inventions and 3 counselors. The Chancellor is the counselor that France starts with. Okay, and then what you're going to see in the special rules is they also start with a longbow, which is ironic that France gets the longbow, but they do. And so that's the situation for them, and that's why they start with 2 things. We're only going to start with 1. Okay, the next thing to bear in mind is, you have your spot for your family. This is your dynasty. Obviously, your king goes in the king spot, and then you just fill it in as you get, married and have kids. This is where you are supposed to put your culture. So these are people in your kingdom that you can marry or whatever, and they go in that pile. But I'm putting it over here because it's just easier for me to reach while I'm filming, okay? The other thing is they don't have any money. So this is where the money normally goes. But since they don't have any money, it's a perfect spot for me to put their cards, okay? So, you know, if you're really OCD about it, they go over there. But I'm putting it here for convenience, and it'll be less reaching for me. Okay, so the game's ready to go. As far as tokens and whatnot, there's a few other things that we need to discuss. My character, us, we all had to shuffle our cards, okay? I start with Navy, which allows me to do naval invasions where everybody else can't. I am William the Conqueror. This actually doesn't go here. These are just your shield, and you just use these to mark things on the board. We start with 5 gold, or ducats, or whatever. The dynasty is going to have this little crown. See that little crown there on the card? Let me focus that for you. See that crown? Whereas this is a regular character card. You don't want to mix them, okay? The regular character cards are what you shuffle. These are the kings that start every scenario. So you can see I have 1 on the board, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is for the 5 scenarios. The 6th scenario is special. It's a 4-player tournament version of this scenario we're doing right now. So anyways, here's what's cool or interesting. Other than the picture, there's really no difference. But you can see that the shield changes, right? This one uses the blue slash. Henry the First uses the same shield we do. Henry the Third has a different shield. Same with Edward the First. Okay, so other than minor variances, it's no big deal. Another option in the game is Glitterhoof. Now, if you've played the video game, you can marry your horse. It's a funny little thing they put in there for humor. And the horse has like special abilities and powers. In this game, it actually also has special, it can only have positive traits. So you could make the horse your spouse in this game, but I'm not playing with the Glitterhoof variant. We're gonna go ahead and just set that aside. Okay, the next thing you have to do is obviously you have to pick a first player. It said whoever won the last game, or then whoever's the oldest. So we will be the first player. I will tell you that being the first player is an advantage. So if you want a more difficult game, don't be the first player. That's my recommendation for you. Okay, then you have these development cards. These development cards are just simply cards like this Navy that I have on my sheet, okay? So remember, it's either an invention or a counselor. It's one or the other. But there's a whole bunch of development cards available. And then there's 3 of them that are here that we can purchase. You have to use a particular action to get them. But like, for example, this one's a steward. We can hire a steward that would give us an extra token. Draw when we build a castle. There's a potential to build a library, or you get a library, and then a marshal. And they all have different bonuses that they give you. Every player can get one of these. This takes you through the game sequence, and then these are your actual actions. Okay, so the game sequence is broken up into 3 eras with 3 rounds per era and 2 turns per round. Okay, I can tell you that the multiplayer game I played with my kids ended in era 2, because the game ends when you get through all 3 eras. That's one way. The other way it ends is if you crusade. The first player who successfully crusades puts a shield marker here, and then it keeps going. And once it finally gets to Jerusalem, the game ends. So the first one, of course, is Constantinople, and then Antioch, etc. So every time a player crusades, it marches down, and once it gets to Jerusalem there, the game immediately ends. There's no more turns, okay? So just as a reminder, the kids and I, we finished in era 2. We didn't even make it to era 3. Now, in a 5-player game, I think that's reasonable, because there are some other rule constraints in this game. The first one is everybody at minimum has to draw 1 crusade card, and you must attempt the crusades once per round. Remember, there's 3 rounds per era. So if you have 5 players doing a crusade, 3 times in one era, then you're going to, or I'm sorry, if you have 5 players doing a crusade, it's not once per round, it's once per era you have to do it. So 5 players doing a crusade is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in era 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if everybody succeeds, the game ends in era 2. Okay? So it's only if you start failing the crusade attempt that the game would go into era 3 in a 5-player game. Now, if you reduce it to a 3-player game, then you're for sure going to go into 3 eras, just because there's other restrictions. You can't do a crusade more than once an era. So there's a lot of weirdness like that. So you have to do a crusade once per era, a minimum of 1, but unless you have the Archbishop as your counselor, your maximum is also 1. The Archbishop lets you do a second one, which is also another way to speed up the game. If several people have the Archbishop, then you're going to have, 5 crusade markers plus another, 1 or 2, based on, whoever was able to do 2 crusades that round. So I guess the bottom line is if you're playing a 5-player game, don't expect this to be a 3-era game. That's my experience so far. Okay, you're gonna have tokens like there's gold, and then in here are, it's possible for the plague to arrive, for harvest, which is a good thing, or crop failures, which is a bad thing. These will come out through events, and then there's also possible to get unrest. Okay, so unrest tokens go away the moment you move a troop, a foot soldier in the space, which is what we call mobilize. So the AI can never have unrest because they're always mobilized everywhere. So the whole unrest mechanic is out of this game. The only people who can have unrest is me, and I have to deal with it, but the AI doesn't. So that's what I was meaning by it's a real negative thing, because one of the primary ways to play this game is through intrigue, and you can put unrest and basically peacefully overthrow. So you don't actually have to declare war on a player. You just make them go into unrest, and then they'll get overthrown and they'll join your cause. And so basically through rebellion, you can take territory. I can't do that against the AI. They are immune to unrest because, like I said, a mobilized troop, it removes the unrest token. So since they always have mobilize, the unrest never happens. The plague and the food shortage, however, those get removed when you tax. So if you do a tax action, it removes those markers. And what the plague does and the food shortage is they actually reduce the amount of money you get from taxes. So, but they do get removed. And the AI never does the tax action. That's another thing. Because they have unlimited money. So the AI territories are going to just be littered with plague and food harvest and food shortages because they never do a tax action to actually remove the tokens. So that's another thing you're going to expect to see. Now you can make a duke or a duchess. If you have a brother or a sister or even a child, you can... Sorry about that. You can choose to make an area, a duchy, I think is how you pronounce it. So basically, think of it like a vassal. They're very loyal to you. Obviously, they're part of your dynasty, but they're a little bit independent, okay? So what this does is it increases the strength of the area, meaning it's going to be more difficult to cause unrest or to conquer it. But if it does get conquered, then that particular family member dies. So that's the risk you're taking when you do that. You also no longer get to tax that area, but it's an option. And that's what these tokens are for. You're going to have a whole bunch of extra banners. Those are just for other scenarios, so just put those aside. As far as components go, we've covered nearly everything. Excuse me. Okay. This is for representing how old your king is. So every time you age your king, you're going to put one of these on. The king will die after the 5th one. After the 4th one, he becomes wise because, you know, elders are wise and good things happen to you. And I will explain that in a second. Okay, last but not least, these action cards all have the same back. My criticism is, here, let me show you. This says war here, but if you pick up a card, it says mobilize, invade. Right? So nowhere on there does it say war. So it's a silly label. But you can look here and see the crossed swords, and that is the crossed swords there, so you're good to go. So you want to make sure you separate the piles and then shuffle them, and I'm just going to put that card somewhere in the middle. Okay, the other thing you're going to notice is it says 0 to 2. Let me focus for you. Or 0 to 3. What that means is at the start of every era, you have to draw 8 cards. And so you're allowed to draw up to 2 tax cards. Out of those 8 cards, 2 of them can be tax cards. So you can choose to go 0 to 2. You can choose to draw no tax cards. The Crusade, you can see here, you have to draw at least 1, but a maximum of 2. Okay, so that's another aspect, and we'll get into that when we actually start the gameplay. The last thing I want to cover, well, actually I'm going to cover it when we start the gameplay because it's important for people who want to see how the game's played. We'll talk about the trait system then, but thanks for watching. I'm going to go get a drink so I'm not sounding so hoarse, and let's go ahead and get going. So I apologize, I didn't mean to poo-poo this game so much. I did have high expectations. It did fall short. All that is my honest to goodness truth. But if you rang my doorbell, I would play this game with you. I mean, it's not like I dislike it that much. It's just, it is what it is. And you have to just accept it for what it is. And it's just something different than what I thought it would be. The AI is actually not bad. It won against us last night. And I'm hoping to do a little better this time. Thanks for watching. Stay awesome.